This isn't your home. You're just renting space in our family. That is what my mother said across the Thanksgiving table. Her bracelet chiming the way crystal does when pride gets loud. The room smelled of sage and brown butter. The city hummed 40 floors below my windows. I set a black folder on the linen zipper. Brass pull. Matte edge. Inside lay a trust deed. A power of attorney. And one neat page stamped by a notary whose pen never shakes. I suppose I should tell you who I am. I'm Sophia. 29. The quiet middle who learned to polish glasses while other people polished reputations. I run operations at a young tech company, nothing glamorous if you believe my siblings. Just headcount and budgets. Supplier calls, and late-night spreadsheets. I live in the penthouse. I worked for oak floors that shine when the afternoon slips in from the river. A terrace wide enough for long thinking. A door that locks without asking permission. Yes. The title is in my name. Yes. The keys feel heavy in the pocket of a jacket that still smells like rain. But this is not a property tour, this is a family story. And in my family, rooms are measured in approval. To my right sat my brother Nathan, trial lawyer smile. Cuff links that wink, like he has a private son. To my left, my sister Victoria, surgery hands. Perfect hair. A laugh tuned for microphones. My mother, Evelyn, chaired the performance. She has always enjoyed directing the little tragedies that pass for tradition. Father poured wine as if it might keep the peace. Which it never does. My mother lifted her glass. To accomplishments, she said, eyes skipping me like a stone. To the ones who keep our name shining. The table clinked. Nathan murmured something about a verdict. Victoria accepted praise, the way flowers accept light. I studied the silver knife at my place, monogrammed. Polished. Harmless. Unless you know what you are doing. If you are older, you already know this part. People who owe you gratitude often pay in condescension. I have learned to nod. I have learned to pass the potatoes and ask about travel plans. I have learned the art of not burning bridges while quietly building better ones. I keep receipts, literal ones and the kind that live in memory. You would be surprised how far that habit will carry you. Stand up. Darling. My mother said, smiling at the cousins and the neighbors clustered near the sideboard. Let everyone see your dress. Success looks different on some of us. Laughter fluttered. I rose, the black folder stayed. I did not blush. When you have carried a family on quiet shoulders, you don't tremble at a room. This is where I give you a small truth. For 2 years I covered shortfalls that did not belong to me, escrow corrections when the old house nearly tipped into default. Legal retainer when another relative tangled a contract. A private school installment for a niece who did not ask to be caught between adults. The wires moved from an account none of them knew. Supervised by a manager who prefers numbers to gossip. No medals. No speeches. Just my name on pages that smelled faintly of toner and coffee. Tell us about your little company. Nathan said, leaning back. Little company. He does that. He makes the whole world smaller so he can hold it. Still playing with dashboards. Still building things that last. I said. Mother tilted her head. Building, sweetheart. Real building is deeds and bloodlines. She tapped the tablecloth where the black folder rested. Not apps. The cousins found that funny. It is fine. I have a sense of humor. I also have patience. It sits in the chest like a slow drum. I waited for the turkey to reach me. I passed the cranberry. I placed the folder square in front of my plate. The zipper whispered when my finger found it. You never forget the sound of a hinge opening when a room is pretending not to listen. Before I show you what sat inside. A word to the wise: boundaries are not walls, they are doors with locks. And it is up to you which keys you copy. I had learned that the hard way by letting my mother carry a spare to too many parts of my life. Tonight, I would be changing locks. But one step at a time. A person my age has to be careful when elders are watching. You know, Victoria said, spreading rose-colored jelly on a roll. This place does make a beautiful venue. We should consider it family space. Holiday traditions. Small ceremonies. Tasteful photos. She looked at me as if I were a concierge. You'd be welcome at some of them. There it was, the smile people use when they move you down a rung. I rested a palm on the folder. The notary stamp pressed faintly through the leather. The paper edges had that firm bite you get only from a good printer. My heart did not race. It went steady. Like a metronome kept by a grandfather clock. This isn't your home. Mother said again, gentler. Which can be worse. Not truly. You are. Holding it for the family. Be sensible. Sophia. You rent your space in our story. I thought about the night I signed for the apartment years ago. Elbows on a laminate desk, while a bank officer explained amortization. I thought about learning how to read vendor agreements so foreign phrases stopped being threats. I thought about sunrises that belonged to no one's approval. When you have stacked your life brick by brick. It is a peculiar feeling to be told the house is borrowed. Maybe this feels harsh. Maybe you think I should have smiled and made peace. I did not. I tightened the zipper half an inch and let it rest. And I said, very quietly, after dessert, we will handle business. For now, enjoy. They laughed again. The room resumed its hum. I breathed. Even a person with steady hands can shake when old ghosts climb the stairs. I reached for my glass. The stem was cool. The bowl thin enough to sing. Across the table. My father gave me the look. Men learn when they are outvoted at home. Half apology. Half hope. I forgave him. It costs nothing to forgive. What cannot be changed? The doorbell rang, neighbors bringing a pie. The terrace doors sighed as guests stepped out to the evening. The skyline threw itself at the glass, the way it does when winter is near. I could feel the folder under my palm like a second pulse. Inside, it waited a trust deed in my favor. A power of attorney that did not bend. Escrow confirmations with dates and names. And one printed screenshot from a private group chat I was not meant to see. But I will not show you those lines yet. This part matters. There is always a line before the line. The moment when you decide not to disappear. I traced the edge of the paper. And I smiled at my mother with all the politeness a daughter can muster without lying. Tell me where you are watching from, and hit subscribe while you are at it. We need to talk about families and money. We need to talk about borrowed rooms and the cost of belonging. In a moment, I will open the folder. In a moment, the room will learn who has been paying attention. For now, eat. I'll tell you the rest after coffee. I grew up learning early that silence was safer than speaking. Whenever I raised my voice, I was told I was ungrateful. Whenever I tried to share good news, someone else's achievements drowned mine out. Over time, I mastered the art of being invisible at my own family table. But what they didn't know was that invisibility made me sharper. I noticed things the way my brother Michael never paid his credit card on time. The way my sister-in-law Evelyn whispered to my mother about investment opportunities whenever bills piled up. I noticed the way receipts disappeared from the counter. And how checks were always written in my handwriting but never signed by them. My house, this small townhouse with pale gray walls. Hardwood floors. I refinished myself. And a deed stored neatly inside a red folder in my desk became my anchor. Every mortgage payment came from my account alone. Every repair. Every coat of paint. Every piece of furniture purchased with my own long hours at work. I didn't flaunt it. I simply lived within my means and made it mine. Yet to them, my independence was an offense. I still remember last Thanksgiving, when I placed a roasted turkey on the long oak table and tried to smile through the chatter. Evelyn clinked her glass and announced, "Imagine how much easier it would be if we all lived here together. This house has space." My mother nodded, as though my home was a family trust fund and not the product of my sweat. They laughed, poured more wine, and ignored the way my hand froze on the carving knife. I wanted to speak, but I stayed silent. Silence was the family currency. Only later, after the guests left, I stood in my kitchen, holding the deed against the warm light. The embossed notary stamp pressed against my thumb reminded me of a truth no one could rewrite. My name, and only my name, lived on that page. Still, their words echoed. "We'll live here. Family property. You're lucky we include you." Lucky, no. I was calculating. I was building something none of them could claim, yet they thought entitlement was a birthright. And what they didn't know was that I had kept every receipt. Every transfer. Every late-night message begging me to cover their bills. My phone was a gallery of evidence. My folders stacked with quiet proof. I'll explain that part soon. For now, Tell me where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe, because what comes next will make you question what family truly means. The penthouse was supposed to be my refuge. A place of peace above the noise of the city. I bought it after years of hard work. $1.30 Every dollar accounted for through long contracts and longer nights. Oak floors that glowed with afternoon sun. Glass walls that opened onto the river. And a kitchen that smelled faintly of lemon oil from the polish I used on weekends. My name sat alone on the deed. Sealed and notarized. Tucked into a folder that I kept close. Yet every time the family walked through the door, they acted as if it were theirs by right. Imagine the photographs we could take here. My sister Victoria said the first evening she visited. Her voice carried the confidence of someone who believed the city itself bent around her. Engagement party. Holiday dinners. Charity events. This is family space. She ran her manicured hand along my marble counter. Not asking. Just claiming. I smiled politely. But inside, I felt that old knot twist tighter. Nathan, my brother, was worse. He had just won a case that brought his firm a 7-figure fee. And he could not resist turning every conversation into a stage. You know, Soph, he said, leaning back with a glass of wine. A place like this should really belong to the family trust. Protection from creditors. Proper tax handling. I could draft the documents in an afternoon. I laughed softly. Though nothing in me wanted to laugh. The title is fine where it is. He waved my words away. As if my independence were a child's protest. Mother listened. Her smile practiced. She had always been quick to praise Nathan for his courtroom wins and Victoria for her glamorous clients. But when it came to me, her voice sharpened like vinegar. Sophia. You should be grateful you even have this. You've always been difficult. If not for family, where would you be? I could have answered that question with receipts. I had transferred $8,000 to cover medical bills when father's insurance faltered. I had paid off Nathan's overdue taxes one bleak winter when he swore confidentiality. I had wired $2,000,000 to Victoria, hidden under the note loan for renovations. Though I knew it went straight into her wardrobe budget. Each payment left my account quietly. Each one was forgotten publicly. And then came the group chat. It arrived one night while I sat on the terrace. City lights flickering like distant candles. My cousin forwarded the screenshot by mistake. Thinking it was funny. In the chat, my mother, Nathan, and Victoria spoke freely. She's just a tenant in her own house. Nathan wrote. Exactly. Victoria replied. When we restructure the trust, she'll sign. She always folds. And then mother. The line that burned itself into me. Sophia is the most useless child I have. Let her play with her little company. The real assets belong to us. I stared at those words until the screen blurred. Tenant. Useless. Us. I saved the image. Printed it. Slid it into the folder with the deed. Proof. Cold and undeniable. You see. I had already taken precautions. Quiet meetings with a lawyer downtown. Papers drafted and notarized. Clauses inserted into the family trust that shifted authority if I could show evidence of coercion or abuse. Escrow accounts tied to my name alone. Set to trigger if signatures were forced. Every insult they had thrown over the years had built into this wall of preparation. Still. I waited. A person learns patience when raised in shadows. Thanksgiving was coming. And the penthouse would host. Mother insisted it was tradition. She said. Though I knew it was performance. She wanted to show my walls and windows as if they were her trophies. I agreed. My smile calm. My folder already resting in the drawer of my desk. When the day arrived, the apartment filled with the usual perfume of roasting turkey. Cinnamon pièce. And expensive wine. Relatives laughed. Glasses clinked. The city below hummed as if it were part of the feast. I carved. I poured. I nodded. All the while, the black folder lay in plain sight at the end of the table. Quiet as a judge. Victoria praised her new celebrity client. Drawing gasps. Nathan boasted of another verdict. His voice rolling like thunder. Mother raised her glass to them. Pride shining. And then she looked at me. Still chasing that little job of yours, she asked. Loud enough for every cousin and neighbor to hear. Still trying to make it sound like real work. I said nothing. The folder's brass zipper gleamed under the chandelier. But inside me, the patience began to crack. Because I knew what they did, not that I had every wire transfer. Every receipt. Every message. Begging for help. Every screenshot of their laughter behind my back. The penthouse was not just walls and glass, it was evidence. And tonight it would speak. Not yet. Though. Timing matters. I refilled glasses. Offered more bread. Passed the cranberry. I smiled, while my mother told the room how proud she was of Nathan and Victoria. How grateful she felt to have such accomplished children. My name did not cross her lips. I caught my father's eyes, tired. Apologetics. He looked at me the way a man looks when he knows the storm is near. And I thought, let it come. Because sometimes the only way to be heard is to let the room fall silent first. This part matters. I'll explain in a moment. Thanksgiving night always has a rhythm. Plates cleared. Pea sliced. Coffee poured. Voices loosen as the wine takes hold. My penthouse glowed warm in the city's dark sky. The skyline looked painted. Steady as a backdrop. Inside. The table turned into a stage. Mother thrived in moments like this. She leaned back. Ring flashing. Voice carrying above the laughter. To Nathan. She said. Who just closed another case. Millions saved. A firm's reputation secured. Remarkable. Applause. Glass clinks. Nods of admiration. To Victoria. She continued. Who was featured in a magazine last month. A surgeon to the stars. Look at her tonight. Doesn't she shine? More applause. Laughter. She squeezed my sister's hand. And then silence. The kind that hovers before the blow. My mother turned toward me. Her smile tightening. And then there's Sophia. Still, chasing her little projects. Still trying to make that. What is it again, startup? Well, dear. Some children build real legacies, others just play. The laughter was thinner this time. But it came anyway. A cousin smirked into his drink. I sat still. My fork lay across the plate. Untouched. The black folder rested near my elbow. Quiet. Patient. But she wasn't finished. She leaned forward. Her eyes bright. You know what I sometimes wonder, she said. Loud enough for every guest. What kind of man would ever propose to someone like Sophia? No stability. No real career. No true accomplishments. Honestly, she is the most useless child I have. The words landed like stones, dropped in water. Ripples spread through the table. Fork still. Aunt stared. My father's face drained of color. Even Nathan's jaw tightened. Though he said nothing. My chest felt hollow. Not pain. But clarity. 30 years of comparison. Dismissal. And quiet endurance had been distilled into one public sentence. I let the silence stretch. You learn. Over time. That silence can be louder than any scream. Then I reached for my phone. It was a small motion unlock. Swipe. Open. The screen glowed. I tapped once. And the television on the far wall flickered to life. Conversations froze as words appeared. Black on white. Magnified under the chandelier light. The group chat. She's just a tenant in her own house. Nathan had typed. Exactly. Victoria's bubble followed. When we restructure the trust. She'll sign. She always folds. And then Mother's message. Bright and cruel. Sophia is the most useless child I have. Let her play with her little company. The real assets belong to us. A hush fell. The city outside seemed to hold its breath. My aunt put down her fork. My grandmother whispered. Good Lord. Nathan half rose from his chair. Color rising to his cheeks. That those messages taken out of context. There is no context. I said quietly. My voice carried in the stillness. These are your words. All of you. Victoria's face flushed. That was private. You had no right. No right, I asked. Meeting her eyes. You made my home your bargaining chip. You made my life your joke. And you did it in writing. Mother's lips parted. But no words came. For once, she had no line prepared. I set my phone down beside the folder. The brass zipper caught the light. A line of gold. My hand rested on it. Steady. You wanted to make this public. I said. You wanted a show. Well. Here we are. The television still glowed with their words. Cruel and permanent. The guests shifted uncomfortably. Eyes darting between screens and faces. My father cleared his throat. Patricia. Not now. I said gently. Though firmly. For the first time. His eyes met mine not with apology, but with recognition. I opened the folder just enough for the crisp edges of paper to breathe. Not yet, not the final blow. But enough for them to see that more waited. You called me useless. I continued. Voice calm. But what you didn't know is that I have kept every transfer. Every receipt. Every wire that left my account for your emergencies. When mortgages failed. When medical bills came due. When bar exams and court fees piled up, I paid. Quietly. Faithfully. For years. Murmurs rippled. An uncle coughed. My grandmother nodded slowly. Her hands folded in her lap. I met Mother's eyes. And still you chose tonight. In front of everyone. To say I am the most useless child you have. Her face was pale. Her hands trembling just enough to rattle her glass. That ends now. I said. No shouting. No table pounding. Just a steady declaration. I closed the folder again. Zipper clicking like a lock. After dessert. We will discuss what comes next. The guests shifted. Uncertain. Some sympathetic. Some scandalized. But every eye now rested on me, not on Nathan's victories. Not on Victoria's clients. Not on Mother's performances. For the first time in my life. I was not invisible at the table. I lifted my glass. The reflection of the television words shining across the stem. To truth. I said softly. It's heavier than any legacy. No one dared drink with me. Dessert came. Though no one touched it. The pumpkin pie sat untouched. The whipped cream melting into nothing. The television still glowed with the group chat. Each line an unblinking reminder. My family shifted in their chairs. Murmurs rising. Then falling back into silence. I let them wait. Waiting can be a kind of power. Finally. I unzipped the black folder. The brass teeth parted with a soft rasp. And I laid the papers on the table. Neat and square. The room leaned forward as if gravity itself pulled them closer. This. I said. Placing my hand on the first page. Is the deed to this penthouse. $1.30 triệu. Bought in my name alone. No co-signers. No guarantors. No hidden clauses. Mine. I slid the next page forward. This is the trust amendment you never bothered to read. The one Father signed when the old house nearly went into foreclosure. The clause that transfers authority to me if evidence of coercion or abuse ever appears. I tapped the television with one finger. I believe this qualifies. Mouths opened. No words. I showed the notary's seal. The power of attorney. The escrow confirmations. Every stamp. Every signature. Crisp and undeniable. Nathan spoke first. His voice cracking. You can't just wave paper around. Trust law doesn't work like that. It does. I said. And you. Of all people. Should know. You drafted half these documents yourself. Remember, I kept every version. Every draft with your initials. Shall I pull them out? His face drained of color. Victoria tried another tactic. Her voice softened. Coaxing. Sophia. Darling. You don't understand what you're holding. These are complicated instruments. Let us help you manage them. I almost laughed. Manage? You mean sign them back over? No. Bank of Sofia is closed. As of tonight. The trust, the entire Haimui Sao Triordo law of it, is under my control. The words hung heavy. Guests shifted. Anon gasped quietly. Mother finally found her voice. trembling but still sharp. You are being vindictive. Families share. Families don't keep score. I leaned forward, meeting her eyes. Families also don't call their children useless at their own table. Families don't laugh behind closed doors about stripping one of their own of her home. You wanted this to be business. Fine. It is business. And the business has changed. Her lips moved soundlessly. I spread the receipts next. Wire transfers. Check images. Dates lined up in a neat column. One by one. I read them aloud. August 20th. $2,000 for your car note. September 15th. 1,500 for medical bills. November 7th. 3,000 for exam fees. December 19th. 1,500 again, same car. Still unpaid. The numbers rolled out like a litany. Some relatives winced. Some avoided my gaze. I paused. Then added. And last spring. Bone gan from my down payment savings to cover Nathan's defaulted loans. You remember that? Brother, you thought it was father who helped. It wasn't. It was me. Nathan's mouth opened. Then closed. He looked smaller suddenly. As if the courtroom confidence had cracked. I turned to Victoria. You remember the bar exam? Don't you? Who paid the fee when you had spent your trust fund on a European trip? That was me too. Every wire. Every note. Right here. Her eyes fell to her plate. The silence grew thick. Like a storm pressing down. I folded the papers back into the folder. Slow and deliberate. You wanted to know what kind of person would ever value me enough to propose, I asked. My voice steady. The kind who sees all of this. The kind who knows I've been carrying this family's weight while being told I am worthless. The kind who knows I am stronger than every insult combined. I looked around the table. Faces pale. Eyes lowered. Guests whispering. Horrified. Fascinated. You want to stay under this roof, I said at last. Then you do so as guests. With respect. Or you don't stay at all. This home is mine. The trust is mine. The money is mine. From tonight forward. The safety net is gone. It was not rage. It was resolution. My father's voice trembled when he spoke. Sophia. I didn't know. I knew his eyes. I believe you. But you never speak for me anymore. Mother tried once more. Softer now. You will regret this. You'll go on. No. I said. I will be free. The room held still. No one moved. No one breathed. I stood. Folder in humped. The city lights behind me spilled across the glass. A silent witness. Enjoy the pie. I said. Though no one would. I have work to do. I walked away from the table. Every step a boundary. Behind me. Chair scraped. Whispers rose. And the fragile empire my family had built on entitlement began to collapse. And for the first time in 30 years. I felt tall in my own home. The morning after. The city woke up like it always does. Trucks coughed along the avenue. A dog barked 3 floors down. And the river moved as if it had never once paused for human drama. I brewed coffee and stood by the glass wall. The folder on the counter where I had left it. Closed now. Like a door I finally learned to lock. I am Sophia. 29. The quiet middle who runs operations for a young company. I live in a home with my name on its deed and a trust I did not ask to carry. Now placed where it belongs. You might expect fireworks after a night like that. What I got was quieter and, in its way, heavier. By 10. The calls began. Father first. Voice low. He said he was sorry. He said he should have drawn a line years ago. He said he understood if I needed time. I told him the truth: forgiveness is a chair at the table. Not the whole table. He could sit if he kept his voice his own. He said he would try. Trying is not always enough. But it is the start honest people make. Nathan texted next. 2 words, I am ashamed. Then a longer one. Asking how to repay debts that ought never to have been hidden. I told him to speak to my attorney and to the bank that handled the wires. To set up a schedule with real numbers and real consequences. He asked if we were still family. I told him the new definition: family is behavior. Not blood. You enter by the door of respect. And it locks behind you if you leave it. Victoria called in the afternoon. She tried for lightness. It crumbled. She cried in the elegant way she has practiced for cameras. Then in the unpracticed way, real people do. She said she was sorry about the words, and sorrier about the laughter. I said I believed she was sorry for being seen. She went quiet. Then she asked how to make it right. I told her to start with a sentence that does not begin with I. She said she would send a transfer to repay the bar fee. I told her this was not about money. And then gave her the routing instructions anyway. We are creatures of habit. We crawl forward one honest transaction at a time. Mother waited a day. The silence felt deliberate. Like a performance after the curtain. When she finally called. She moved through the old steps. I only wanted the best. You misunderstood me. We have always shared. I listened. Because listening is a mirror. At last I said. Softly. That choosing a favorite child is a kind of theft. You steal from the others the simple right to be ordinary without being belittled. She did not speak for a long time. Then she asked if I would come to Sunday dinner. I said I would meet her in a quiet cafe. 12 o'clock. 1 hour. No audience. And that we would talk about boundaries. Not memories. She said yes. And I hung up with a steady hand. In the days that followed, I did practical things that look small until you understand their weight. I met the building manager and updated the list of approved guests. I changed the elevator fob permissions. I installed a keypad lock on the office where the documents live. I moved the original deed and trust papers to a safe deposit box. Signed out in my name alone. I reopened a notebook I had kept for months and wrote 4 headings across the top. Home. Work. Money. Heart. Under each. 3 lines only. You get clarity when you wash in your ink. Under home. I wrote peace first. No keys without agreements. A kitchen that smells like lemon oil and warm bread. Under work, build clean systems. Mentor the young ones who look tired at 9 at night, refuse to apologize for competence. Money, a separate fund to educate the small cousins. Administered by a third party. With rules that cannot be bent by tears or holidays. Heart, call the friend who always shows up. Say yes to a quiet dinner without checking the family group chat. Walk the river on Sundays. Hat on. Phone off. Good news landed where it always has when you remove noise. Without the midnight calls and the surprise bills. I slept. The strong kind of sleep that makes your back straight again. My days grew longer in the best way. At work? I saw problems before they became invoices. I renegotiated a supplier contract and cut our burn in half. The founder asked me how I had learned to keep calm in messy rooms. I told him truthfully that if you have eaten Thanksgiving with cruel people and kept your hands steady, a board meeting is a picnic. He laughed. Then offered me a place on the leadership track. I took it. Not because of pride. But because I am good at what I do and it was time to stop acting surprised by that. Word of the dinner. Of course. Traveled. Gossip walks when truth can simply stand. A few relatives called to say they were shocked. Shock is easy. A handful wrote notes. Quiet and real. One cousin sent a photograph of her first paycheck and said my speech made her decide to keep her own money. I printed that picture and pinned it inside the pantry door where the spices live, cinnamon beside courage. As for the trust, I did the dull work that makes power clean. I sat across from the trustee in a room that smelled like paper and old carpet and reviewed every line. We split the fund into 3 lanes with clear rules: education for minors, health emergencies verified by documents, and a small arts grant that requires no humiliations. Only a plan. I removed the lane that read reputation management. That one had always been a vanity project disguised as legacy. You do not need to be cruel to build a future. You just need to prefer light to mirrors. What happened to the old pattern? You ask. Patterns do not vanish, they wait behind the curtain. Mother slipped once at our cafe meeting. She said, in a careful voice, that my place would host a spring luncheon because people expect it. I folded my napkin and said, with a smile, that my home was not a venue. She looked at me as if measuring a new country, then she nodded. We talked for the rest of the hour like 2 women who were not characters in a play. We will never be easy. She and I, but even a thorn bush throws flowers in the right season. I did something else that week. I invited 3 friends, 2 from work. 1 from the building to a quiet supper. No fine quina. Just white plates and good bread. A pot of stew that smelled like rosemary, and a single apple tart. We ate at the kitchen island. Not the long table where the speeches used to happen. The conversation drifted to books, and how to choose lamps, and how to tell the difference between loneliness and rest. When they left, I washed the plates and thought, this is what a home sounds like, when it is owned from the inside. If you are listening with older ears, let me say it plain. Boundaries are not walls. They are the shape of your yes. Forgiveness does not mean you return the keys. It means you stop rattling the handle from the outside. Money is loud when it is the only language spoken in a room. It becomes a whisper when dignity shows up. A month later, I stood in the lobby with father while the doorman called a taxi. He wore the old coat I used to tease him about. He looked smaller. Or maybe just more honest. He said he had been to a budgeting class at the church basement, and learned that late fees were not fate. He smiled a little when he said it. We hugged. Not to erase the years, but to mark the new map. The taxi door closed. He lifted a hand. I lifted mine. On a Sunday morning, not long after. The terrace filled with yawning sunlight. I opened the doors. Let the breeze find the curtains. And set an old radio on the counter. A saxophone wandered out and made the kitchen feel like a diner at dawn. I mixed batter and poured it into a skillet. The pancakes were lopsided. But they tasted like a house that keeps its promises. I ate them with my feet on the railing. The city below doing what it does best, enduring. Inventing. Forgiving. Trying again. I will not tell you that everything is fixed. Life is not a courtroom. And there are no verdicts that solve the human heart. I will tell you this, the cruel line my mother used to say in her shiny voice, does not live here anymore. The black folder stays closed most days. The door opens for those who knock with respect. If you think I made the right choice, comment, write. If you have a wiser way, share it. I am listening. Story 2. My parents found it amusing to take away my accomplishments. Without us. Let's see whether he can succeed. They took everything and smiled. I never sought assistance. 15 years later, I received 107 frantic texts saying they needed me. I appreciate you being with me today. I hope today is going really well for you. No matter where you are. If you could let me know in the comments the city or nation you're viewing from and what time it is there. That would be greatly appreciated. Let's start our story together now. There are times in life when your soul is burned by the experience. Your past is split into distinct before and after moments because they are so abrupt and crisp. It wasn't a vehicle accident or a natural calamity. In my opinion, my parents' laughing could be heard reverberating along a corridor. I have carried words that were intended to bury me with me all my life. Currently in my mid-40s, I sit in my own office and gaze out at a skyline that I helped create. It's one of those calm evenings when the city below hums like a happy beast. There is a slight hint of rain and possibilities in the air. The world I lived in 15 years ago is not the same as this one. A universe meticulously constructed brick by brick. After all, I believed everything to be solid. Dissolved into dust. Family is the subject of my narrative. The genuine. Messy. Complex. Sort. Not the kind you see in Hollywood blockbusters, where love may become entangled with power, and those who are meant to support you can end up being the ones bringing you down. It's about having the guts to leave the house you believe to be your haven when you discover it's actually a prison. Even if doing so means losing everything you held dear. I was always the quiet one growing up. The spectator. Claire. My older sister. Stole the show. Harvard Business School. Charm without effort. Always had the appropriate response. Success was a second nature to them. She was loved by my parents. Richard and Diana. Their pride. And Claire was a lighthouse. A bright, noisy creature. My accomplishments, such as earning my MBA while working full-time at their accounting business, were supposed to guide the others. Seemed like subdued tidbits in Claire's big story. I put in more effort than anybody realized. Believing that my commitment, skill, and inherent worth to the family business would ultimately give me a little portion of the publicity Claire earned simply for being alive. My whole 20 seconds were tainted by an unsaid, desperate need for approval. I committed myself to the company. The standard was long hours. I handled each customer as if they were precious. Driven by lukewarm coffee, and the frantic hope that my efforts would finally be noticed. Each balance sheet is a problem that must be solved precisely. I was more than a worker. As a son, I put all of my energy into carrying on the family tradition. Or so I believed. It was supposed to be different. The winter I turned 30. A tech startup on the verge of going public was a significant potential client that I had been following for months. Viridian Dynamics is a business. It was a complicated transaction that required late nights spent reading industry reports and figuring out their particular financial requirements. I gave it everything I had. The chase's excitement was irresistible. What really motivated me, though, was the idea that getting this client a significant acquisition that I completely sourced and closed myself would be indisputable evidence of my value. That would be a triumph. I told myself that this would be my moment because it was too big and important for them to ignore. The main conference room served as the venue for the quarterly firm meeting. It had the scent of stale ambition and polished wood. I was anxious but excited as I sat there. I have a presentation deck in my arm. Richard was grinning as he stood at the head of the table. He mentioned the firm's expansion, brushed aside the hard work of my team, gave generic praise, and then moved on to new business. He cleared his throat as his gaze swept across the room, stopping momentarily on me before focusing on Claire, who sat there with a calm and collected expression. I'm excited to make the announcement. We've landed Viridian Dynamics. A truly significant acquisition that will transform our portfolio. Richard exclaimed, his smile splitting. Claire, my daughter, will be in charge of this account. My breath caught. My chest tightened. It wasn't just that he gave it to Claire. It was the casual dismissal of my role. He mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that significant legwork had been done, but attributed the win broadly to the firm's collaborative effort. Collaborative, I was the collaborative effort. Confusion, warred with disbelief. I managed a stiff smile, clapping along with everyone else. Claire, accepting congratulations, graciously, after the meeting, broke up. The room buzzing with congratulations for Claire. I tried to talk to Richard privately. Dad. About Viridian Dynamics. Indeed. Marvelous news. Isn't it? He cut me off already, turning to talk to someone else. Claire is just the right fit for them. Young, dynamic. They really connected with her vision. But I landed them. I did all the legwork. The proposal. Details. Details. He waved a dismissive hand. It's a team win. And Claire has the leadership experience needed for a client of this caliber. Caliber? I had an MBA and years at the firm. It was classic Richard taking my achievement, minimizing my role and repackaging it as Claire's destiny. The familiar bitter taste rose in my throat. Doubt gnawed at me. I needed to see the client file the official transfer documents that evening after everyone had left. I went back to the office. The air was cool and still the only sounds. The hum of computers and the distant city traffic. I accessed the shared drive. Navigating to the client's folder, I opened the presentation I'd poured my soul into. My stomach dropped. My name was gone. Not just from the cover page, but from the prepared by sections on every slide. Every financial model. Every piece of documentation. My detailed contact logs were deleted. Emails I'd sent the client were removed from the shared folder. It was as if I had never touched the account. My hands trembled so fiercely I had to hold the edge of the desk. A frigid fear, unlike anything I'd ever experienced, began to spread through me. This wasn't just about handing Claire the account. That was painful enough. This was about systematic, purposeful erasing. This was malicious. I stood there for a long time. The stillness of the workplace pushing in. The scent of old coffee and office paper suddenly seemed overpowering. Driven by some frantic, wounded instinct, I grabbed a few hasty, unsteady photographs of the main files on my phone. Enough to indicate my name had been there. Then I went back to the home. It was late. Yet a light was on in my parents' study. I heard their voices low at first. Then, Richard's voice gets louder. I came to a halt at the door. Under my shaking fingertips, the hallway wall's wood grain seemed harsh. To be honest, Diana, it's better that way. Richard said that he was becoming overly ambitious. He was beginning to seem necessary. However, Richard completed all of the job for that customer. The nuances of my mother's typical reluctant complaint were mixed in with her quiet voice. His tone was piercing. Impatient. Claire will do it brilliantly. To be honest, it's time he took a lesson. Depending on us at all times. That he would be handed things. My blood froze. Depending on them. I was expecting things since I had put a lot of effort into this company. The physical strike was the unfairness to them. Then followed the words that would reverberate for years in my head. The nonchalant harshness with which it was delivered left me speechless. Without riding our coattails. Let's see whether he can win. There was a pause. Followed by the sound that really made me feel something. Both of them made a soft, airy noise. As though they were talking about a harmless joke. It sounded like someone stabbing you. At some point, he will return. Richard laughed dismissively and confidently. Herek widersas. The sound of my mother's sigh was one of feeble compliance. I was all too familiar. With every step numb. I retreated from the door. My feet felt slippery on the shiny floor. My childhood home felt strange all of a sudden. Each picture of the family on the wall is an allegation. Horrible caricatures of their happy faces. As though someone had wrapped my lungs in barbed wire. My chest constricted. My customer wasn't only taken by them. They'd witnessed my years of work. I made it into a terrible joke out of my frantic want for recognition. My own parents. I awoke to a terrifying reality the next morning. The keys to my workplace were broken. The deactivation of my access card occurred. My business email bounced. All of my customer connections were banned on my phone. Which is my business lifeline. My business number was disconnected. I cleaned my desk. Unceremoniously. Personal belongings were placed in boxes near the employee entrance. They had mercilessly and methodically interrupted me. Eliminated me in the same way that they had removed my name from the records. With a cardboard box containing my meager possessions, I stood on the pavement outside the building. My face felt chilly in the morning. And I could smell the usual smell of city exhaust on the street. Coffee at a distance felt strange. I felt a deep void in my stomach. The type of feeling you get when you discover that the basic reality of your universe has suddenly been upended. My foundation. The family I had dedicated my life to. Had just thrown me out like garbage. My lowest point was that. The initial weeks were a haze of suffering. Bewilderment. And embarrassment. My parents laughing and Richard's hurtful remarks kept repeating in my mind like a broken record when I stayed with a college buddy. They were deafeningly silent. No texts. No phone calls. And no effort to apologize or provide an explanation. Nothing at all. My own blood-pure clinical severance was the ultimate kind of ghosting. The murmurs followed. Friends who were still employed by the company, or who had a social connection to the family, began making hesitant phone calls. Hey. I've heard you quit the company. The sound of their voices faded. Uncomfortable. The family story was evidently already public knowledge. Spun with care. I was challenging and unappreciative. Believed that I was too skilled for the family company. Perhaps even suggested that I was unstable or had stolen from them. Anything to explain my abrupt absence. I was the unpredictable, untrustworthy one. And their social mask was securely in place. Seeing familiar faces, I believed them to be buddies. Accepting it was like being betrayed again. A reminder that my parents' influence was not limited to our household. It was a great shame. How was I able to be so ignorant and blind? How could I have remained in a position where I was obviously devalued and where my love was contingent on fitting into their predetermined box because I needed their acceptance so badly? That desire's fragility. It was excruciating to be exposed and mocked now. I gazed at the blocked numbers on my phone and the grainy pictures of the deleted papers I had shot that evening. A hard, cold stone formed from the knot in my gut. Thick and oppressive. Fortunately, the discomfort started to change gradually. A seething righteous rage replaced the raw grief and guilt. And the anger was so intense that it sent a quiet hum of indignation through my bones. They had not just harmed me. They had made a concerted effort to ruin me on both a personal and professional level. They wanted me to fail. They wanted me to be powerless. To return meekly. Sitting by myself in my friend's borrowed flat. Pleading for crumbs of fame or a low-paying job. The icy determination started to take hold as the city lights flickered through the window. I had no intention of crawling back. I refused to let them prevail. Not due to the customer. Not only for the money, but also for my own dignity, sanity, and the freedom to live and thrive as I see fit. It was more than simply business. My soul was on the line. A struggle to protect my reality from their deception and gaslighting. I started by doing some research. For legal reasons as well as for a new employment. It seemed intimidating. So I looked for attorneys who focused on business conflicts, wrongful termination, and even intellectual property theft. Horrible. In order to escalate this, the final tenuous link has to be severed. The glimmer of a future reunion. However, that thread was poisonous. It was the bond based on their casual harshness and my unwavering sacrifice. They had to cut it. Miss Elena Ramirez was located by me. She had a serious internet persona. Her evaluations emphasized her keen intellect, perseverance, and straightforward handling of intricate commercial disputes. I told her the whole embarrassing tale in her neat little office, which smelled somewhat of old paper and lemons. An anchor of cool professionalism. I showed her the doctor's unsteady pictures, the documentation that described the overheard discussion, my years of labor, and the abrupt, cruel cut-off. I talked about the years of feeling inferior, the gaslighting, and the favoritism. She patiently listened. She took notes sometimes. Het Erplin. She leaned forward as I finished, raw and exhausted. Her eyes remained fixed. What did they do? She asked. In addition to being morally repugnant, her steady, quiet voice that cuts through the emotional haze is probably prohibited. In connection with that client account validation, we have grounds for a number of claims, including wrongful termination and intellectual property concerns. I was reassured by a professional and dispassionate outsider that I wasn't insane, that their acts were wrong, and that their effects went beyond my own suffering. After being smothered, it seemed like the first breath of fresh air. She saw more than just the drama. She recognized the unfairness. She observed the case. I was told to gather everything by Miss Ramirez. Every email, draft, performance evaluation, an informal text message from a coworker complimenting my work on the Viridian account. Anything that proved my involvement in anything that demonstrated their authority or my abrupt termination. This became into my purpose. I combed through old email archives, external hard drives, and personal cloud backups for days. I got in touch with past coworkers who had left the company years prior to find out whether they had any old shared papers or if they recalled my involvement. If they had heard that I was leaving, it was a laborious procedure, driven by a silent, raging willpower, one tiny bit at a time. The knot of humiliation started to unravel. In my guts, a steel rod of purpose took its place. While searching through old corporate data I had stored on a home backup drive years prior, an unexpected and unsettling piece of information came to light during this procedure. Only as a precaution for my own job. I never anticipated this. I discovered a file with the harmless label firm history. Early life. It included financial records from the firm's inception, old partnership agreements, and letters between my father and his first business partner, George Thompson, who abruptly departed the company in the early 1990s. Every time his name was mentioned, the official explanation was creative differences. Richard would usually blow it off. But buried deep in the letters was a string of increasingly agitated letters from George, written shortly before he left. In spite of their equal partnership agreement, he accused Richard of persistently trying to force him out, manipulating the company's finances, and using family ties to get an unfair edge in transactions. George talked about his access being restricted, his accomplishments being dismissed, and ultimately, a settlement figure that seemed incredibly cheap for someone who helped establish the first reputation of a successful business and co-founded it. It wasn't the same as what happened to me. Although George wasn't Richard's kid, the way he behaved and the ways he used control, marginalization, and money grubbing to gain more and more power were horrifyingly similar. The same playbook was used. It struck me with a cold clarity as well as a blow to the belly. This wasn't an isolated incident or a sudden, ruthless whim that was only meant for me. This was their method. They were genetically predisposed to this. This pattern stemmed from a drive for total control, fear, and greed. They hadn't just deceived me. They were reciting a script. A covert history of control and manipulation that probably went back decades and was employed to safeguard their riches and influence within the company. My wrath was changed by the revelation. It was no longer merely personal. It was about responsibility. Exposing a systemic rot. And breaking a vicious cycle of poisonous conduct with unsightly deep roots. This insight strengthened my commitment and guided my approach. Regaining the customer was only one aspect of this. Equipped with this devastating insight, and an increasing amount of proof, Miss Ramirez and I spoke about our options. A whole litigation would be time-consuming, expensive, and untidy, revealing private information in a way I wasn't sure I wanted to. However, we were in a position of power. The Viridian Dynamics client. Technically, they were still employed by my parents' company. However, they would undoubtedly go, incurring serious financial and reputational harm. If they learned the truth about how they were obtained by deceit and the abuse of the individual who actually performed the task, our objective was to utilize the facts about how they obtained the client as indisputable evidence of their dishonest and unethical behavior. Not necessarily to win the customer back for me. This may compel the settlement, harm their reputation, and above all, make their activities known to those who really cared. It was difficult to contact Viridian after being barred from company channels. Luckily, I recalled from a non-firm networking event years ago the personal email address of their VP of Operations, Miss Anya Chin. I had to try. Even if it seemed unlikely. I wrote a well-crafted email asking for a quick, private meeting, which Miss Ramirez vetted and approved. Since the customer had a right to know and it would affect their relationship with the company, I didn't accuse them in the email. Instead, I just mentioned that I had important information about the account acquisition process that day. The language was accurate, professional, and captivating enough to grab their attention without coming off as a resentful ex-employee out for vengeance. Miss Chen, curious, and a touch suspicious, decided to have a brief meeting and insisted on having their legal representative present. The scene was prepared for the encounter. The discussion took place in a neutral conference room downtown on a Tuesday afternoon. It was a sterile area with beige walls and unpleasant chairs. It had the scent of generic cleaning products and business stress. Miss Ramirez brought a little briefcase filled with our proof. And I followed her. A sirene. Powerful presence by my side. Diana and Richard had already arrived. Claire was also there. Looking smart in a business suit. Exuding a sense of cool expertise and professional contempt. Flanked by their lawyer, Mr. Sterling. A slick older guy with weary eyes and an air of weary assurance. The parents wore masks of their most respected and worried company owners. They still obviously had faith in the client's VP of Operations. But I now saw through it all. Miss Chan was there with her own lawyer, Miss Davies. A sardonic, reserved woman. There was an air of unsaid tension in the air. In a theatrical act of civility, Richard gave me a stiff nod that stopped short of his eyes. Diana smiled slightly and strainedly. She clasped her hands in her lap. Claire stayed out of my line of sight, concentrating on her immaculately manicured nails and sometimes glancing at her parents in annoyance. Mr. Sterling began with a trained, silky voice. He gave their version. I was an unhappy worker who had quit the company due to issues over my job and pay. And I was now slandering the company out of resentment. And maybe the need for recognition. He minimized my role in the Viridian account, claiming that the firm's standing and the senior staff's cooperation were what gradually developed the client relationship. No individual is working alone. Then came Miss Ramirez. In sharp contrast to Sterling's sensuous tone, her voice was stern yet calm. She wasted little time in personal assaults or hyperbole. We're not here to talk about employee complaints, she said. She looked straight into Miss Chen's eyes. We are here to provide accurate proof on how your company obtained the Viridian Dynamics account, with a focus on the intentional erasure of information and major misrepresentations made to the customer. She then laid out our evidence on the conference table and started to deliver it methodically. During the acquisition phase, I had direct emails with Miss Chan and her team. The emails were printed with complete headers, indicating that the sender address was mine and not a generic business account. A signed affidavit from Mark, a former colleague who had left the firm years ago and had nothing to gain from helping me. Predated the meeting where Claire was announced as the lead testimony. It contained drafts of proposals and presentations that clearly showed my name in the prepared by section, along with metadata and timestamps, proving they were created and edited by me. Declaring that he had overheard talks, suggesting the parents want to ignore me and give Claire the credit. He detailed my unique work on the Viridian account, with every bit of proof. I saw the mask start to come off. Richard's jaw clenched and his cheeks tightened. In his head, Avine poised. Diana's tight grin turned to a terrified one as she fiddled anxiously with her purse. Claire made an uncomfortable move. At last. He gave me a gaze that seemed to be one of icy irritation, not surprise or guilt. Miss Chan and her attorney, Miss Davies, observed closely, their faces shifting from indifferent interest to worry and finally to outward displeasure. When Miss Ramirez showed the pictures I had taken with my phone, in contrast to the subsequently wiped copies from the firm's system, the original documents from the night of the meeting still had my name on them. At last, Richard lost it. He blustered, pushing forward in his chair and raising his voice. Those could be faked. His computer skills have always been strong. He most likely done it himself to harm our reputation. Their legitimacy is verified by the timestamps and metadata. Miss Ramirez calmly said. Mr. Richard. Her tone piercing his arrogance. Additionally, Mr. Sterling, I would counsel your client avoid bringing up the subject of fraud, since doing so might lead to additional legal action. We'd be delighted to investigate. She hesitated, allowing the danger to linger. The strain was nearly intolerable. They found themselves in a corner. Despite being exposed, they continue to use gaslighting, denial, and bravado to defend themselves. They have it set by default. The last blow was then dealt by Miss Ramirez. The information exposed the faulty core and went beyond merely acquiring clients. Moreover, she said, her tone lowering a little, growing even more solemn, our research showed a trend of comparable actions throughout the company's history, indicating that this was a planned tactic rather than a singular occurrence. She produced copies of the damaging letters I had discovered about George Thompson's departure, emphasizing his claims of financial manipulation and Richard's willful marginalization in order to take over the company decades before. She also showed us a copy of a private note from the company's internal records that a current, disillusioned employee had given us anonymously. Someone who had personally observed the toxic workplace was talking about ways to effectively transfer client relationships when some staff left shortly before this discussion. This memo, which was dated before the quarterly meeting even happened, specifically mentioned my name in a footnote pertaining to the Viridian Dynamics account, and stressed the importance of centralizing contact points and ensuring minimal knowledge transfer to prevent the departing employee from keeping client connections. The client was no longer the only consideration. This was undeniable evidence of a long-standing, systematic practice of manipulation, treachery, and maybe fraudulent activity for power and financial advantage. It revealed decades-old hostility and premeditation. It made a clear connection between my predicament and the sinister past I had discovered, demonstrating that this was not a singular occurrence but rather a well-thought-out business plan based on deceit, power, and a readiness to sacrifice anybody who stood in their way. There was silence in the room. The intensity of the disclosed truth caused the air to crackle. Richard's face turned a blotchy, apoplectic crimson as the hue faded. Diana's eyes widened in terror as she gasped and covered her lips with a shaking palm. At last, Claire appeared really terrified, her poise crumbling. She whispered angrily as she glanced at her parents. What have you done? Dad, Mr. Sterling seemed very uneasy as he stammered. This doesn't matter. Firm concerns, old history, and secret information. It identifies a pattern of behavior that is closely related to a claim of wrongful termination and fraudulent misrepresentation, like ICE. Miss Ramirez shot back her voice. It implies a willful attempt to mislead and take advantage of both clients and staff. Viridian Dynamics was purchased under false pretenses, according to Miss Shun, to prevent him from following you. The worker who completed the task was carefully removed. For the first time since Miss Ramirez started, Miss Chen, the client VP, spoke. Her smooth voice sliced through the tension like a knife. She referred to him by his first name. Mr. Richard. Her tone was cold, a glaring reflection of the professional distance that had just exploded. Is this accurate? Did you intend to deceive us? To conceal who worked on our account? To put someone else in charge, even though they hadn't completed the acquisition, as he stumbled. Richard's brow began to perspire. No. Of course not. This is ridiculous. He's telling lies. Everything is twisted. He is an unhappy worker. He was weak in his denial. Krazy. That man drowning in his own dishonesty. Beside him. Diana broke down in silent sobbing. Claire appeared enraged. But she focused her ire on her parents. Anger thins her lips. Miss Chun glanced at Miss Davies. Her attorney. Who nodded slightly and firmly. She then returned her attention to my parents. A chilly, professional disappointment hardened her face. This is not acceptable. Integrity and honesty are important to our business. Based on the indisputable proof that was shown today, it is obvious that your company has seriously violated ethical standards and public confidence. She got to her feet. Carefully gathered her paperwork. With immediate effect. We are ending our relationship with your company. Regarding the changeover, and maybe other issues, our legal team will get in contact. That being said, she and Miss, after gathering their belongings, Davies departed the room, leaving just Richard's labored, raspy breathing and Diana's muted sobs. The ensuing hush was deafening. It was more than simply tense. The weight of failure, humiliation, and the acrid taste of repercussions weighed heavily on it. My parents' expressions were a mix of disbelief, anger, and growing terror as they gazed at the empty doorway. Their victory, which was based on erasure and falsehoods, had suddenly vanished in front of them. On the floor of the meeting room, their well-crafted facade of respectability was in ruins. This was the calm, clinical moment of justice, delivered by the unquestionable weight of truth and the client's integrity rather than by retaliation. The true triumph was revealing the truth about their business practices. I didn't need to win the customer for myself, demonstrating that I might achieve by being truthful rather than by imitating them. I gave them a look. My father was vanquished and left in the open. His expression was one of incredulous rage. My mom broke down in self-pitying cries. My sister, whose ambition was dashed by their demise. It was looking at them both. There was no victory in my heart. Only a deep, painful longing for the family that never existed. The real connection I had always craved. And a silent feeling that I had at last firmly defended myself, gathering my papers. My hands solid this time. I reclaimed my own world. With her task done, Miss Ramirez whispered to their sputtering lawyer. We're done here. We left them in the broken remnants of their meticulously crafted falsehoods and went away. It felt like I was leaving a jail I was unaware I was still in as I left that room. The immediate results were not positive. Parades or festive meals. The job was steady and quiet. As promised, Miss Ramirez pursued a payment for my unjust firing and the egregious theft of my Viridian Dynamics work product, in order to prevent a protracted public court struggle that would reveal even more of their past and financial machinations. My parents, who were devastated by the loss of their main customer and the resulting harm to their image in the small local business community, reached a settlement very fast. The compensation was reasonable and gave me the financial support I needed to start over. However, the money wasn't the true worth. It was the admission that they were at fault and that my experience was real rather than fictitious. Despite their reluctance and legal coercion, they suffered serious and long-lasting repercussions. Viridian Dynamics' demise was only the beginning. Their carefully constructed social mask and reputation for honesty were irrevocably broken. Their business, which had mainly depended on my quiet competence behind the scenes and their public facade of respectability, started to slowly and steadily deteriorate as word of the meeting spread quietly throughout the industry. Other clients, hearing rumors and witnessing the fallout, started to question their practices and left. Employees who were disillusioned by the exposed toxicity, or who understood the truth, departed for more morally upright positions. As more individuals became aware of the brutality and greed hiding under the surface, their financial difficulties grew and their social status declined. They had to deal with the tacit rejection of a society that cherished integrity, or at least the appearance of it. By association, Claire's reputation was also damaged. Suddenly, Being the golden kid wasn't so glittering. The road ahead was obvious yet difficult for me. I launched my own modest accounting firm using the settlement money, Miss Ramirez's advice, and a good amount of perseverance. It was intimidating. The long hours had returned. However, they were for me this time. For the future, I was constructing on a foundation of integrity, aptitude, and diligence. There were difficult days, slow months, and periods of uncertainty when the old voices of inadequacy attempted to reappear. However, every little victory, every new customer, every well-balanced, inexpensive, felt earned, genuine and all my. And I wasn't alone myself. One of my first clients was a man named David, who was an unexpected ally from the firm that leaked the document. I received business from Mark, my old colleague who supplied the document. After offering me a place to stay, my friend became my first employee. Contributing expertise and loyalty, I created a new network based on respect for one another, common ideals, and sincere connections rather than kinship or duty. These individuals were my genuine family because they recognized and valued me for who I really was, and openly applauded my accomplishments. The greatest healing came from finding them. The actual healing process was sluggish and irregular. There were times when I felt angry, sad for the family I had lost, and affected by the years of manipulation and gaslighting. I spent some time speaking with a therapist, coping with the agony of discovering who was meant to love me. Such deliberate brutality had been possible with unconditional. It was no longer about them. I wanted to cure myself. I gained knowledge about limits and the distinction between forgiving someone and permitting destructive conduct to persist. I discovered that it's acceptable to lament the connection you wish you had, even if you're vehemently shielding yourself from the truth of the one you did have. I regained confidence in my own judgment. My business increased substantially over the following 15 years. I achieved success by working hard, being resilient, and having integrity rather than by riding coattails. I traveled, purchased my own house, made lifelong, significant connexion, and discovered a happy, purposeful, and peaceful existence. The old family drama was pushed aside, with its characters fading into the distance. A torturous chapter came to an end. I didn't interact with Richard, Diana, or Claire very often. They never acknowledged the past, and their forced grins were usually brittle due to distant Christmas cards and maybe shallow interactions at a rare gathering of common acquaintances. They never expressed regret or acknowledged their actions. It was thwarted by their arrogance, or even by their total incapacity to confront the reality of their behavior. Eventually, I also ceased relying on them. I didn't need their recognition or regret to be at peace. Then this past week arrived. It was a wet Tuesday evening, and I was wrapping up my work late. Outside my window, I can see the city lights flashing while a gentle jazz tune plays in the background. My phone buzzed with a notification about a new message request on an old, little-used social media account. Normally, my phone is silent in the nights. I clicked it open out of curiosity. Diana sent it, and a series of others below it. From Claire. From Richard. The numbers next to their names increased quickly as you scrolled down 50. Basher. eBay. 107. 107. The spare team messages. They lasted for a number of days. The initial ones were hesitant, even ungainly. Son, are you all right? We have you on our mind. Then they got more serious. The civility that was so painstakingly constructed is vanishing. Give us a call, please. It is crucial that we speak. They revealed glimpses of crisis as their panic grew. Their business was suffering miserably. Now, they had to deal with the consequences of their poor investments. Legal issues resulting from long-standing dubious activities, maybe connected to George Thompson or even the eventual emergence of Viridian Dynamics. Health problems were brought up. Claire was facing a challenge that was causing her brilliant life to lose its shine. They required assistance. Financial assistance. Links. Legal counsel. My recommendation. We acknowledge our imperfections. Diana's first message read swiftly. Then a traditional deflection. However, isn't family, now we need you. It's really hard. Your dad isn't feeling well. He regrets certain things. According to another of her. Richard sans doute les mails. More straightforward. Even demanding. As though he was still in charge and had been for years. Take the phone. This is significant. Your family depends on you. It's urgent. The most unexpected were Claire's messages. A mixture of fear and barely concealed expectation that verges on indictment. Why don't you answer? Do you not understand our situation? It's not good. We hoped you would. They sounded damaged. In a desperate situation. Making contact with the one they had rejected. They were coming back. Not with sincere regrets or apologies. But with demands and expectations based on a sense of entitlement they still harbored. These were the same individuals who had laughed at the prospect of my succeeding on my own, and who had methodically attempted to remove me from both their past and my own life. Notwithstanding the passage of time. The person they had thrown away, the one they believed would fail, was exactly what they needed. I read the messages. The years of suffering. The battle. And the rebuilding while I sat in the silence of my office and gazed at the shining screen. In front of my eyes. Everything flashed. A silent film about my history. No victory was achieved. No. I did tell you so. Contentment. There was only a deep silence. A feeling of completion. I viewed them as damaged. Dealing with the fallout from their own acts. And ultimately reaping what they had sowed. Rather than as the all-powerful individuals who had formerly controlled my destiny. Their lie had come crashing down. My initial thought. There was a glimmer of that old duty. Conditioned by years of longing for their affection and acceptance. A twinge of sympathy. However, it was swiftly put out by the strong recollection of that laughing reverberating across the corridor. The nasty remarks regarding riding coattails. The office was unoccupied. My name was purposefully erased. The scar. Was there a reminder that I had survived the fire, the poisonous gases from which I had fled? I reflected about Miss Ramirez, who instilled in me the need of setting limits. I considered Mark and David, as well as everyone else in my life who had made the decision to stand with me. They were my true family. Now based on love and respect for one another. I gave the work some thought. I had at last discovered a work that was based on detachment from poison and sincerity. They required assistance. My assistance, without them. The assistance of the individual they had attempted to guarantee would not succeed. It was frigid and loaded with irony. I left 107 messages. None of which I answered. Rather, I went into my contacts. Located Miss Ramirez's number. And texted her. Do you recall that instance from years ago? The one involving Viridian Dynamics and the company. They have returned 107 messages. They require assistance. She responded very immediately. Sensible and strict limits. David. Keep your limits in mind. I took another look at the texts. I could send a polite rejection. I could calmly and logically explain why I wouldn't assist them, and why their behavior had long-term effects. Even that, though, seemed to give them vitality. Recognizing a claim they had lost about me. Opening a door that I had struggled to shut. They were interested in my ability to thrive without them. I had done a fantastic job. I had created a life. A self. And a whole universe in the process. In a world that their toxicity could not infiltrate. They had no place. Their world, which was based on deceit, manipulation, and a disdain for the value of others, was falling apart. And they needed me immediately. Truth was the foundation of my universe. Resilience and hard effort were robust and consistent. I used the messaging app to covertly choose their contact threads. I erased them one by one. I then blocked them. Each and every one. There was silence on the screen. The numbers vanished. I lost sight of the waterfall of despair. A calmness swept over me. I had never felt something so powerful and deep. It was neither retaliation nor coldness. It wasn't the joy of witnessing their misery. It was utter freedom. It was the silent, potent strength of deciding for myself what my own family meant, my own limits, and my own well-being. The authority they had exercised and the control they had yearned for were now useless. They believed that my future would be destroyed if I erased my past. They were mistaken. I created an untouchable future for them. They never had control on the ground. With others who recognized my value. And in that truth silence, I created a life away from their shadow, surrounded by the dazzling lights of the metropolis. At last, I discovered my home. What is family really all about? And when does one have the courage to leave? To discover who you are,